Hey, have you ever heard about a game called Civilization? Of course you did. Everybody knows about the board game released in 1980 called Civilization by Evan. Oh, you didn't? Well, maybe you've heard about this one, the Meiers Civilization released in 1990. Of course you did, that's probably the one you thought about when I said Civilization. It did add some inspiration from the 10 years old board game. But the most important feature that was kept from the board game to the Sid Meier's adaptation is, of course, the title. And while the board game was a relative success, the computer game by Sid Meier's was just a miracle. And you know, Avalon was already making plenty of computer games and they saw all of that. Huh. So there's some money to be made with these computerized board games. So in 1991, a full year after Sid Meier's release, they released their own version, Advanced Civilization, the board game. So yeah, they didn't really get it, huh? But let's think about a situation here. Figure out that you're a 1990s strategy computer games aficionado, and you decide to play Sid Meier's game. You know, it's great quality gameplay, it's not just a board game on the computer. And then you start surfing the BBSs and then you learn about the success of Civilization. And there's some rumors around going on that there will be a new Civilization, a new game, a sequel, a new release that will expand on every facet of Civilization 1. But you know, back in the 90s, the information on the web was really hit and miss. You decide to go to your local computer retail store to see what's in store now. And what do you see on the top shelf when you come in? Of course, Advanced Civilization. Now you know the game's on, huh? One more turn. Yeah, sure, until the sun sets again. You buy the very expensive piece of software, you bring it back home, you put it into your freshly installed MS-DOS, and you boot it up. Huh, interesting. Avalon Hill, you know very well that name. Very reliable board game maker. So glad Sid Meier's working with them now, huh? And okay, it's not maybe what you expect at first, but you know, it's a strategy game. It gets better the more you play it, right? That's what everybody says. So you start playing a little bit more, you open up the interface, you start a new game. Okay, that's weird. The basic default expects you to play with 3 players and no computer on the game, but that would not be very much like Civilization 1 with the single player experience, so at least the setting lets you move that a bit around so you can play alone against some CPUs. You get going, you go into the map. Alright, we got a real world map of the Mediterranean Sea and the land surrounding it. It's not so bad. It's not the random generated maps from Civilization 1, but you know, Paradox tried it and it works well making strategy games with real maps. That's not the core issue here. Now you have to select your nation, so you go through a list. Oh, all these beautiful names. You got Africa with the elephant, and you got Iberia, and you got Crete with the triangle, and okay, so you just pick one of them. Now, you know how Civilization games work, huh? You're gonna get a settler, you're gonna settle down your first city on a good spot, you're gonna start exploiting it around, creating units, and invading your neighbors, because that's how Sid Meier sees your conquest of the world. But it's a bit different now. They just ask you to click around with some tokens and shit, and they ask you to move the tokens around the map and shit, and then you can create ships with tokens and you can move tokens around, and you see your opponent as moving tokens around on the map, and then you realize you're just playing a fucking board game on the computer. Eventually the frustration phases out and you realize after all why Civilization's games are so good, and Advanced Civilization might not be such an advanced version of the same game. Indeed, it is a literal adaptation of the board game onto the computer. And usually modern games go the other way around because computer games are just more popular. So if you make a Europa Universalis computer game, then you release a board game 30 years after the original. Back in 1995, when this game was done, the principle weren't so cut clear as how to interpret board games on the computer. So the rule sets are very similar to the actual board game, and now I never played the board game. And clearly it's evident from the default setting that the only reason there are computers for this game is so that the developer can say, yeah, you can play alone. Because playing against a computer isn't as great as wiping your friend off the board that's sitting right next to you. The game is actually pretty basic outside of that. You have to manage your tokens around, and these tokens are an abstract representation of the rural population of your empire. And whenever you have a token in a region at the end of the turn, the amount of token there will be double when you start the next turn, but you have a supply limit in a specific area. For example, 2 or 3 or 1, the red little numbers, these represent the maximum amount of tokens. Any exceeding token when you finish a turn will be subtracted and sent back to wherever. Now, of course, this means you are quite limited in your expansion, so what do you actually have to do to be able to grow strong and powerful? Well, you see the tokens represent the rural support population, but you can put 6 of these tokens in one of those red or yellow squared region, and they will be able to form a city. The cities are the backbone of your empires, but you will still need some of that rural support population token representation, because for every city you build, you need at least double the amount of tokens available on the map to support the livelihood of that city. But the city biggest perk will be granting you access to resource cards. Now every time you finish a turn, you get an amount of resource card according to the number of cities you have. So if you only have 1 city, you'll receive 1 resource card. If you have 2, 3, 5, 8, 9 cities, then you'll get just as many trade cards. And now it's not just random out of a pile, you actually have specific amount with limited inventory of resources for each level. So any player who has 1 city has a choice between 2 resources presented to them randomly until there's an exhaustion of 1 city resource bonus. But if you have a second city, in addition to getting that first 1 resource, 1 city card, you also get a 2 city card resources. Now these resources become more and more expensive, and these resources will be critical for trading. At the end of every single turn, every nation will convene around the trading table. Of course, this is considering they have enough resources to do so. You'll be able to offer up to 3 of your resources, and so can any other player do so, and you can set your expectation. For example, if you want to present a trade offer, you'll be offering 3 cards that will be visible, but only 2 of them have to be true. So you can announce, for example, 3 silvers for trade, but then you hide behind one of these silvers a calamity. Because the trading you see will be too nice and simple if you just traded resources and help each other. Of course, you can offer majestic offer, like the gold that's worth 9 units, and then swap in a salty salt underneath worth only 3. Nah, they thought about that, huh? The trading you can bluff 1 card, and then slip in a quick calamity to the other player. This will of course impact greatly your reputation amongst trading partners if you start pulling sneaky little moves like that. Better ship it out if you get one, because otherwise it will backfire on you if you end the trading session with a calamity on end. These calamity will range from triggering earthquake to destroying city or changing city ends, or just famines, reducing the amount of tokens on the map and destroying the city in the same go. Because dealing with these calamities will be the bread and butter of the game. Once you start piling up some resource, and every single other player is localized with their own cities and their own trading pattern, and you will need to get enthralled into these trading sessions. Otherwise, you'll not be able to fully benefit the qualities of the resources you have on hand. When trading, you try to give away the resources you don't want anymore and receive the resources you want. For example, if you have a resource worth only 1 and then you get a second one of it, then they're both worth 2. And then if you get a third of the same kind of resource, then they will be worth 4 together. And you get a 4th, then they'll be worth 8 together. And it doesn't sound like a lot when you think about it, but when you start getting something like textile that's worth 5, The first is 5, and then the second will be worth 10, and then the other one will be worth 20, and it will keep doubling such and such. And these values in the token are used to acquire new technologies through the technology tree. But unlike games like Civilization, where the technology tree will unlock you chariots or airplanes or massive war machines, in Advanced Civilization, these technologies will only unlock a slight bonus for your country. But these technologies are important because once combined with the number of the cities, they will allow you to access higher H's in the AST, the ancient score board, or something along these lines. The AST is important in this game because you will determine the number of cities and technologies you need to unlock to move to the next era. And as you progress this era, you will eventually reach the end, and the first nation to achieve this great feat will be crowned the greatest empire of advanced civilization, ancient advanced civilization, something along those lines. But it's still all very cryptic, and there's no real way to get some help out of the game's menu for understanding what are your objectives. Once you have a city, you start stacking some trading goods, and then you could try to trade these goods with other players and eventually reach the end of the scoreboard, and you either win or lose. I'm not quite sure really what happens. But to be frank, is a review of the game, the whole aspect of moving tokens around on the map, getting resources and trading them with other players, these are all things that are much more enjoyable in a physical form. So if you actually play face to face with your friends and you move tokens around and you trade cards and you use superfuge to trade these different cards, then yeah, it actually becomes very fun to play a game like that. I can see the potential in that. But on the computer, and especially if you forego the default recommendation of multiple player, you play alone against the AI, it's just not an enjoyable game for that. Especially when you get to the thinking part of it, because just this segment, look how long it takes for the computer to decide whether they will build a ship or not. At least the music is all MIDIs and very, very, very nice. We've been hearing it for a few minutes now, so hopefully you could tell it's some quality tunes. And that pretty much wraps it up for what you would get with Advanced Civilization. Actually, if you want to play Advanced Civilization, you should maybe check out the games called Civilization 2, Civilization 3, 4, 5, 6, or any of its spin-off or clones. You will have much better value than actually playing Advanced Civilization. But hopefully you've enjoyed this quick review of Advanced Civilization, the not board game adaptation on the computer in 1995. And if you did, make sure to drop a like and subscribe, because that means a lot to me. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.